U.S. history. I miss all of you guys so much. I really hope that we can see each other soon, hopefully this school year. So I just wanted to jump in here super quickly and remind you that you have a test on Friday. It is open notes. I have attached all of the notes that you need in that resources tab. It is going to be slightly more essay than multiple choice than usual. And that will only be open on Friday. I will open it Friday morning, and then I will run all day until 11:59. By 11:59, you have to have it taken. I will close it so that you can no longer submit anything to me. So you have to have it finished by then. So just a reminder that that is the test. JFK conspiracy theories, let me know what you think. I really wish that I could be there to share it with you. But hopefully we will be able to get together again soon. This is an interview that I did with someone who grew up in Bradenton and was living here in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement.
Okay.
There you go. Now you're good.
Hello, everybody. I'm Deborah Thomas, and I was born and raised in Bradenton, Florida. And I was born in 1946. My elementary school was Bradenton Elementary, and it was the only black elementary school in Bradenton. Now, Manatee County, we're talking about Palmetto, it had 3 elementary schools, black elementary schools, and that was Bradenton Elementary, Memorial Elementary, and Palmetto. There was no middle school for blacks when I was going to school, so Lincoln Memorial High School was in Palmetto. And that was 7th grade through 12th grade when I went to school.
That's quite a few people then. And was it a pretty big school?
Not real, 700 students?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay,
because,
so yeah, I'm thinking of modern day Bradenton.
Yeah.
Definitely not as many.
Yeah, you're thinking. Like Lakewood Ranch, total country. It was
Mayaca State kind of thing?
Country. It was, because it was all Manatee County, but it was country.
Yeah.
And when you went so far, it was country. Years later, when you went across, you know where Carlton Arms is? Mm-hmm. That was sort of developed when you got across that bridge, but if you went further, it was nothing else. You had homes here and there, and it was a dairy farm and all. Remember, but it was not developed even out that way. It was just country.
Yeah.
And they had like ranchers. They had ranches like Lakewood Ranch. They had ranches and they had tomato farmers and all that, but it wasn't as built up, of course.
Right. What were some of the differences that you saw between like the white schools and the black schools?
Well, we didn't know. I'm looking at my point of view as a child growing up. We were aware of that, and they were separate, but we weren't aware until we got more in high school and older of the differences. And so we saw more of the differences when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And one thing was, I knew a bit more because my mother was a teacher. There was certainly a difference in the salaries. Mm-hmm. Now, no teacher in Florida was being paid decently, but the black teachers are paid even less. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So they weren't funding education as they should, but the black schools were funded even less. What we did know was that we never had enough books. Now kids get a set of books I'm talking about public school, they get a set of books for school and they get a set of books for home. We were happy to we knew if you had the 6th period class, you probably wouldn't get a book because they didn't have the budget for that. So we weren't able sometimes to take books home to do homework because we had to leave the books in the classroom for the next class. What they used to do, Manatee County, they would hire usually maybe students, I don't know who, in the summer, and they would clean up the books, like from Manatee High, and they would ship the old cleaned up books to our school. And we laughed because we knew, we're students, we knew these were the old books from Manatee High. So those are kind of things. I remember our one class, we had one microscope.
I've heard you take turns, I guess.
And it was not the newest microscope. And my one teacher had gone fishing, so we had fish to dissect. So, but our teachers, we were not, as far as their quality of teaching, we were not shortchanged that way. They knew that our only way of succeeding and for things getting better was education. It was education, education. I went to school with kids whose parents worked in the fields, and they would save and buy their child an instrument. I think now you can borrow or rent the instrument. Well, back then, to be in the band, we had a band. Speaking of the marching band, they'd have the DeSoto parades and all that. Well, Lincoln High's band was invited to be there, but they put us at the last behind the horses. It used to. But here we are. We knew and we would make a joke out of it. It wasn't. That's the only way you can get to not joke, but you have to find humor, because we were just saying, this person who's next to John Cena, he can really play that saxophone and step around horse poop. And Mr. Hammond was our music teacher. He was the music teacher for all the black elementary schools. So we didn't get music every week. And I don't know, we might have gotten it once a month or whatever, but he managed to, they put on plays, or if he wasn't there, the teachers did. And when my mother started teaching in Florida, Florida required, I think, you to have a teaching certificate. So I think she might have started teaching out of high school. Mm-hmm. And then as Florida required more, my mother went back and got more. So then they required like 2 years. So she went back and got that. Then eventually 4 years. So she went back and got her 4 years, right. Her training. So she started early. And she used to talk about, she'd meet somebody on the street. She said, I used to teach with her. And I said, is she a teacher now? She said, well, no, she didn't have the money to go on and get more education. More education when she was starting out to teach. Also, the black schools went. This wasn't when I was in school. This was before. It might have been in the 40s. My mother came to Manatee County in like 1932 or something. She was born in Florida, but it was northern Florida, Lake City. And she said the black schools were only open 6 months out of the year, where the white schools were open 8 months out of the year. One reason they followed the crops. So 6 months out of the year, so that the black schools could be out, so people could work in the fields. Segregated means not just it was the public schools. There were certain laws, we call them Jim Crow laws, that were passed that mandated that there would be separate public schools, separate like offices, doctors' offices, separate everything, restaurants and all of that. Even the restrooms are separate. If you went into a building, they had white, female, white male, and then they had colored. They didn't say, it wasn't called black, it was called colored. And they didn't say female, that was it. The water fountains, I remember the water fountains. You had white, which was the cooling water fountain, and colored, which was this old grungy water fountain. I'm not kidding. The old water fountains. And so everything, that's one of my memories is everywhere. In fact, we would be in the store and we'd say colored, and we'd say, oh, let's turn this water fountain. We see what color comes out. Just kidding, as kids. But everything was white and black. Everything was separate. Even in the movie theaters, it was called the Lincoln Theater down. It's torn down now, that we could go to. And downtown Bradenton, it was the Palace Theater. That was for whites. So everything was white or black. Manatee Memorial Hospital, they even had a wing just for, if they colored. You could give birth, orthopedic, communicable disease, you were all on the same floor. Oh, this is certain attractions. You ever heard of Silver Springs? Have you ever been there to Silver Springs? Well, we couldn't go to the Silver Springs. What they had for, quote, colored was called Paradise Park. It was in the same location, but it was a dinky little area, the same river. Have you ever been on that, to Silver Springs? Have you ever been on that glass bottom boat? Okay, it's a beautiful river, kind of eerie, really old Florida. Well, Paradise Park was a part of that. And we could take the glass bottom boat ride. Of course, you paid for it and you got on at this place. But the thing is, and John Cena and I still laugh about it, when they would sail up the river, they'd bring us by the white section, which was, can you imagine? It was like, Disney World. And we would be, it's a wonder the glass bottom boat didn't tip over, because we would be saying, is that Silver Springs? It was night and day as far as Paradise Park. But it wouldn't have been so bad if we had not known what the other part was like. Paradise Park was fun to go to, but it was nothing compared to what the Silver Springs attraction was. So that's why they used to say, oh, separate but equal. Used to hear that. Well, they'll be separate but equal. There was no such thing as separate but equal. Not at all. It was, we knew the difference. The doctor's offices, separate waiting rooms. And we knew if you went to the doctor, you were going to be waiting a long time. People get upset if they have to wait an hour. Try 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours of wait at a doctor's office. I was thinking later, many years later, I'm thinking, well, they probably saw about 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 white patients before they'd see one black patient. So you always knew when you went to the doctor, you had a long wait. And all I remember, those rickety folding chairs, 10 folding chairs. That's what we had to sit on. John Cena, 2 years older than me, she remembers it was just a bench outside. You were in the building. It was called what the colored patients sat on. The white patients, they were in a room. And I think I passed once, I'm thinking, they had a couch. I mean, it was, so the waiting rooms, they were smaller, had those rickety chairs that are either a bench. So, and you had a long wait. And this was no matter a dentist or doctor. And it was one dentist, and people that told my mom said, well, I hate to go to him because he cusses at us. And my mom said, well, why would you go to somebody like that? I guess they didn't know they didn't have a choice. There wasn't a dentist who wanted to really have black patients. I don't know why. And there was a black dentist from Tampa who would come over every Saturday, office hours. And, I think later, I heard he was a good dentist, but he wasn't good. He wasn't a good dentist because he didn't do the best he could have done. First of all, he would come over, open the office when he felt like it. You had to wait and all. And I remember losing a tooth once. I might have been 12, and I had this toothache, so my mom sent me there. And he pulled the tooth. Years later, I'm in Pennsylvania, I'm going to my dentist. And he said, you have that tooth? I said, yeah, I was about 12 months old. He said, you have strong teeth. I can't imagine a dentist pulling your tooth and not trying to save it. Well, I had no idea that dentists, they wanted to save your teeth, because people going to dentists, they usually went and they were getting their teeth pulled. We, of course, had a public health department. They would come. Worms were a big problem when in the 50s, some of the 60s, because a lot of kids went around barefooted and they would get worms, or some families still had outhouses and and this is white or black. So that was a big problem. And so they would come into the schools. Parents they sent little cans home, and parents had to send a stool sample, and they were collected from the school, and then they would find, those students who had that. This is what the public health department did. And so she would come regularly, once a week, and bring, we thought those are big red pills, and kids had to take those because that was getting rid of the worms. So the health department did more with the schools as far as that. Ringworms were a bad, they're again playing outside. Their homes were in air conditioned, but it's like a fungus, but you can get a skin fungus. Have you heard of ringworms? Some kids would get it in their hair. You'd see kids with patches, and if they did, they had to wear a little, like a stocking cap if they came to school. But they would come to school and bring ointments for that. So there were a lot of communicable diseases that we don't have now because they have more treatments for it, and conditions have changed and all that. So that was real prevalent. Ringworms, worms, intestinal worms. What do we call
probably
them?
Like
sand sores.
Pinworms and stuff, probably.
Yeah, those kind of things. Those were all things. And kids putting stuff in their mouth, those were. We went to off the Skyway. Again, there was beach. The Manatee side was for colored, black. So if you lived in St. Petersburg, Tampa, you came to that Manatee side. And the white side was when you get over the bridge, over to the left, that was the white side of the beach, the Skyway Beach. Well, of course, our side was dinky, and it had sinkholes. There was a family, they lived a street over from us, their daughter, they were at the beach one day, and she got into a sinkhole. And she was, elementary age? Yeah, she was, because she would have been a year younger than me. But she was drowned. So that's the side that we got.
Wow.
We could not go to the Manatee Beach. We were not allowed to swim at that beach. The beach we were allowed to go to was in Venice. And that beach is now known for all the shark's teeth you can find. So that was the beach we were allowed to go to. And the last time we were there, I might have been 6 or 7. And it was some families there. It was a holiday. And I had learned to dog pedal. And Mom had just fixed the straps on my bathing suit. And I'm out there dog pedaling, and they're screaming from the shore because they see a shark. And and they're screaming and all. Here I am dog pedaling. And finally, Mr. Mosley, he was able to reach me. And Mom, good thing she had fixed the straps, because he grabbed the straps of my bathing suit and pulled me. And my mother says as he was pulling me in, the shark went that way. So needless to say, our picnic was over. It was about 5 families there at that beach that day, so we never went back there. But that's the beach where you can find a lot of shark's teeth. So that was the beach we were allowed to go to.
The shark beach or the whole beach.
Yeah. We did not hear their bitterness, and it was not passed on to us because I think they knew that bitterness is counterproductive. You won't get anywhere if you get bitter and want to retaliate. And in a sense, we're outnumbered. So the only way they knew of things getting better was through education, through the laws. And that had to change that way. It couldn't be through violence or retaliating, because that wouldn't have helped. A lot of people would have been killed. And that's what I'm thinking now. And it was a slower process, but eventually it was done. All of that. Let me see.
Do you remember all that happening in the 60s, hearing about it with the marches?
Oh yeah, it was on TV. And in fact, I was elementary when, because it started in 1955, December, when Rosa Parks, the thing in Montgomery, Alabama, and when she was asked to go to the back of the bus. I remember that too, getting on the bus and you couldn't sit up there, you had to go sit in the back. I remember that. So that was 55, and I must have been around 9 years of age or something like that. And I remember seeing on our black and white TV, they had on TV where the people, Dr. King, he was a minister there and had organized them, and it showed the people walking or taking taxis, and they said, we're not going to ride these buses anymore. And for, I think it was more than a year, that none of the black people rode the buses. And see, many of them were domestic workers and worked, and many in Montgomery, Alabama, used the bus system. So they said, okay, we're not going to take the buses. And so they saw when they lost that, they were losing money, so they had to negotiate. But it took that long. So that was the beginning of it. Then other cities, other towns, other places started saying, yeah, you know. So you had this, so that was the beginning of what started. It was not always like Florida was a violent state. Florida used to lynch people. Florida, my mother grew up in Lake City, Florida, and my mother talked about lynchings. And as a young person, and she talked about, my grandfather was a minister and he had a funeral home also, and he was a teacher. But anyway, and he had 12 kids. My mother's one of 12, so he had a lot. So, but she remembers them a talk like how it would be a network, and they said, they're going to be burning a cross in front of this person's house. We need to go and protect that person. So she remembers. Oh, and the train station, the bus station, they had two separate places. Of course, the colored section was dinky, not well kept. You hated to use the bathrooms. You did not, if you could avoid it could. The other side was all nice. You know, it was
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom was telling me about how like when you guys had to travel, you had to like pack food up ahead of time or something.
Yeah, we did, because you couldn't. Now you can just, they have rest stations, or you could just pull into. It wasn't like that. You couldn't even. Well, my parents, if they didn't pack food to take with us, they stop at a supermarket. And they buy the food, but you couldn't just say, oh, we're going to stop at Cracker Barrel or something like that. And the restrooms, maybe when they stopped to get gas, maybe there was a restroom that said color, but it would be so nasty. So nasty, you did not want to use it. Even a man wouldn't want. It was just awful. And so what you had is when you traveled, somebody would say, well, I have a sister and her husband who live in this town, and stop there, and you know, at least you can use the restroom or something like that, or they could tell you where you get something to eat. And so it was like a network. Now, one place in the network where we were told that you could eat was a truck stop, but you had to go around the back. But you could, and I've been with my parents when we were traveling where we could stop at a truck stop, but they had, of course, aside for the colored again, but you could get decent food, because you got black people men who were truckers then, so they had to. So that was always told, say, well, if you stop at a truck stop, you can get gas and you can get something to eat. So, certain towns you went through on the train, and that was, like I said, it was a certain car, that the colored car, they told them to stay away from the windows, because people would throw rocks, or could even shoot into the windows. So certain towns that trains went to, they were told to stay away from the windows. Certain crimes that would happen, if the police chief knew the family, might follow it up, might not. So it was, even with certain crimes or certain things happening, a woman could be raped. Well, a black woman, would they follow up on it, or would they not? You didn't. It depended on the police department. It's up to us to do the best we can in our little section of the world to make it a better place. And also it's up to us to stick up for what's right, and make sure, other people are also, we have that responsibility, not to just keep quiet, but to make sure other people are treated fairly. And that's about it.